Oh, but he got away.
I don't know your best is, I don't think so. No, I think it's working at Epic at that point.
Yeah.
They got no ice cream.
This drop's on quite well.
All right.
Yeah.
What should they coming up?
It's not coming up. Be fresh. It should be up.
I don't need to know. I don't need to know. No, she doesn't. I love you.
Oh, I will fix it. I can fix it.
Knocking out.
I know I can fix it.
How do you go?
All right, basketball. All right. Sean, thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Wait, that's the way.
Still not coming out.
Obama.
But the thing is, you had to break.
I know they comes back out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, but have you been at work?
You're sacrificing the fire.
Okay. Well, what is God?
Oh, see it.
So right now, this guy's just waiting.
For gaming, I know they are. Sporting stuff like comic stuff.
Is this not? Oh, berries. Take a look. Why do you do that? Because it's a bus. I didn't know.
No, I saw on Instagram.
Actually, the 17th. I have a song.
I do it live now. So, pull it out.
He must have won the water.
I did.
He walked.
I was like,
Also, that. Because I'm about to make a lot of shit. I don't know, but it's recommended for me. Like, oh, they come down, go down, and go, you gotta change it down again, is that the one?
I am. Well, I live stream. All right, guys, we're doing live stream right now. So let's take talking down. Is everybody have the YouTube video up? We all ready? Okay. All right, so today's lesson isn't really a follow-along lesson. It's more a showcase of just stuff from my own game and things that I think that you could use. You can watch from up here too. Yeah. See, you're the only ones close though. Everybody else far off in the boonies there can't see. Okay. All right, guys. So here is something that I first want to cover with you, which is making blueprints. Remember, blueprints are objects with code on it. You hit add new, actor, whatever, for purposes that your game's never necessarily going to see, but for your own purposes as a designer. Okay, so if you bring out an animation of a character, for example, into the world, hey guys, you can leave if you're going to talk in the middle of my lesson. All right, so if you bring out an animation into the world, right, you have a few options here in the details panel, but they're not like that great. Yeah, you can change the actual animation that you're deciding to play. I got this guy, he's cheering the crowd or whatever. I can change it to now he's, stringing a bow. I can check mark or uncheck looping, which is kind of like useless because it just means he's going to go into a T-pose as soon as he's done playing the animation. I could check mark or uncheck playing itself, which determines whether it's playing. And I could at least set the initial position of it, but that's it. Yeah, question. Yes, exactly right. So what I ended up doing is just making a new blueprint, okay, called Animation Actor. And I'm going to show you what the code on that looks like. And you'll be able to recreate this because it's pretty useful. So it's a blueprint actor. The event graph literally has no code on it. Instead, where I put all the code was on this construction script. That's that script that we seldom use, okay? Construction script, what is it used for? It's for playing code that happens in the editor at design time, not in play time. And so it looks like this. Construction script, I'm getting the play length of the animation. I promote this to a variable called animation. I made a float variable called animation current position. I use this node called clamp, which says, hey, here's a minimum, and then here's a maximum. And I make that maximum the length of the animation, all right? Promote that to a variable, name it current position of animation. Okay, that variable is going to be public, right? So in the details panel over here, it's going to have its eyeball icon open. And then I'm going to override the animation data on the skeletal mesh that I've added. Notice that in the details, or I'm sorry, the components panel is literally only a skeletal mesh. That's all I've added. And then, of course, I set skeletal mesh to be whatever a variable that I've named called model is going to be. So what does this give me? It gives me this. I now have this thing right here that I've selected called Animation Actor. And what Animation Actor lets me do is it lets me, of course, set the model that I'm using to any model in my game that I want to use, set the animation to any animation that I want to use, okay? And I also have these other variables that the original animation that Unreal gives me that I don't have access to. For example, I have the current position, but also have things like animation speed and stuff. So what I could do is I could speed this guy up really, really fast if I wanted to. What I like to do, though, with this sort of thing is use the same animation several times without anybody realizing it's the same animation. Because if I have these two guys play exactly identical, let's say I'm doing a crowd cheering, right? So I'm going to have these guys going to be the front of a crowd, all three of them. Let me turn down my grid. And I hit play. See how they're all exactly identical? And that doesn't look very good. Well, with this simple blueprint hack, what I can go in and do is say, okay, this middle guy, let's set his speed to, instead of being 1.0, let's set it to like 1.1. That means he's just 10% faster than the other guys. I'm gonna hit play. Okay, see, immediately he already feels kind of different. Now let's go even further with this and say, okay, on this next guy, let's set his play speed to like 0.95. So he's a little bit slower. But what we could also do is mess around with this animation current position. And so this guy, I can drag and go through the entire animation sequence. So you can see this animation is 3.4 and a bunch of numbers seconds long. Okay, it won't let me drag past there because of that clamp node, right? Clamp forces a number to be between a minimum and a maximum. It clamps it. The minimum is 0, but the maximum is what? Whatever the length of that animation is. Okay. So what I can do is say, hey, I want this guy's animation when the game starts to start at second 1.95, whereas these other guys, they start at 0, or second 0. This other guy will say, hey, I want you to start at your current position to be at second 0.4 or whatever. Now when I hit play, all these guys look completely different from each other, like they're doing something different, right? But it's still the same animation. If I want to get even crazier with it, one thing I could do is go in here and add some blueprint code where I flip the guy's transform around and I make him face the other way. So like, I'll do that right now with this example. I'll put this guy over here and I'll do that, okay? Now his arm's in the other position, so it's mirrored. So one animation asset, but different effects on each, right? So that's an example of a short blueprint that you could make. The other thing I want to show you is this thing called a actor component. All right, so far we're used to making new blueprints and coding all of our code on that blueprint itself by going add new, actor, all that stuff. But there's something else that you can do, which is make a sole event graph, a place where code lives, but there's no viewport, there's no construction script. So you do that by going to add new, blueprint class, and instead of choosing actor, you go down to this thing that says actor component. Actor component. Now, if I do that and I open it up, literally all it is an event graph. Okay, you're used to seeing this, where you can add variables and do custom events, begin play, event tick, all of that stuff. But there's no viewport, there's no construction script, and it can't be dragged into the world. I cannot drag an actor component into the world. Well, so what is it good for? It's really good in this sense. You can add this event graph to any other actor, anything in the world, static mesh, another blueprint, character, and that will become an event graph on that character. So what I have done with this is I've made, for example, this thing called Npc Behavior. Okay, this is an actor component. There's no viewports, there's nothing. And before I used to have NPC actors, right? They have a skeletal mesh. I tell it skeletal mesh to animate a certain way. It has a construction script. Hey, I want your model to look like this, your animation position, your animation play rate, like the stuff we did already, right? It was an animation actor. I got rid of all that, and instead I did this, where it's just all the code lives on its own event graph. Again, this segmenting away all of the behaviors that an NPC will have, how he knows to go to work, where he finds his home, how he navigates, what he does when he crosses another NPC, his health. All right, his health is a combination of how much food he's eaten, which drains over time, how thirsty he is, which drains it over time, and if he's sick. Right? All of these things are all living on this one event graph. What I then do is I can go into this world, and I can have another blueprint called NPC, which I do, but that NPC blueprint has very little code on it. Very, very little code on it. We'll take a look at how much code it has. So this one's a typical actor blueprint, right? But you can see that's not even connected. That's not even connected, so none of that counts. It's all the old code. So virtually, it looks like just about all of this except for this thing that has to do with dragging an NPC with your mouse isn't doing anything on this NPC. So where's all this code? Well, it's on the NPC behavior. In the components tab, if you look, I've added that actor component that I created to his components list. Why or how? When I click the add component and I type in NPC behavior, or whatever the name of your actor component is, it shows up in the components list. But here's the thing. I can go in here and pick like this stone pillar and click add component and add an NPC behavior to that pillar. And now that pillar has all the code that an NPC would have. So presumably I could go up to that pillar and talk to him and do all that stuff and, you know, barter with him. Whatever it is that I've coded that my NPCs could do, I can make anything in my world now act that way. So you have the ability to have this event graph that can live on its own and be added to any other thing. Now, what's the usefulness in this? One, it's a really nice way to like clean up your code and keep it all in one place.
How do you do that?
How do you?
What the fuck?
Is there a question in there?
It just crashed.
All right. Hit send and restart. So here's usefulness in this. If you let's say I want to introduce like wandering dogs into my world, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to code them to wander. Well, let's say that I want my, let's say I've already made my NPCs in the world already wander, okay? They wander around when they get bored or something like that. I don't have to recode now that I have this dog animation in there. I just add a little dog animation, add component, and add my NPC behavior and check mark a Boolean called wander. And now this dog will wander throughout the world, and I never had to code any of it. So it's a really useful way of having these segmented, individualized little event graphs that can float around, and you can add to anything that you want in your world. So that's really, really useful. The last thing I want to show you is so you can kind of see there's a lot of code on this actor component. We're not going to go over all of it, but there's one particular segment I want to show you, which is this thing known as the timer by event. I don't think I've shown you this in any formal follow along type of lesson. I'd like you to get used to seeing them and also using them. Set timer by event. This node is like magic, super duper useful. First off, this is your new event tick. I like it better than event tick for a lot of reasons. Number one, if you do set timer by event, I'm gonna, I'll show you how what's happening with this one right now. We have this custom event called start loop of NPC schedule and behavior. And we set this timer by event. It's going to do like an event tick sort of situation where it's going to recall this custom event called NPC schedule. And so this code is going to happen every so often, every certain amount of seconds. All right, so if I were to make something like this from scratch, I want a repeating looping event, I'd right click and I'd type in timer by event, and I'd find the set timer by event node. Okay, choose that node. And you see there's a couple settings on here. One is time. This is how often it's going to execute the code, the event. I like this because this acts as your delay, like you do with an event tick event, where you're adding a delay so it doesn't constantly update too fast or whatever. And you generally don't want it to do that because it'll make your game lag. So what I might do is set this to 0.5. Okay, so twice per second, whatever event I plug into here is going to be executed, as long as looping is check marked. Okay. And then where it says event here, this is sort of the funny part. You plug in a custom event through that. So if I type in custom event, and we'll do like our example from before, the wander. I'll type in wander, right? This little square here, that goes into event. And so as long as I call this on like begin play or somewhere, that's going to start the looping of this wander code, just like that. Now, something that this lets you do that event tick doesn't let you do is you can pause the event at any time you want in your code and then replay it again. Pause and unpause it. How do you do that? Right here on set timer by event, you can drag off return value and promote it to a variable known as a timer handle, and we'll just call this wander timer. And what you can do is later on in your code, whatever the player presses P to pause or C to whatever, or something else happens, I can drag off of this variable and type in pause. Pause or unpause timer. So you can pause and unpause all these variety of things. So this is a really useful, sort of strange looking node. It's different than we've been accustomed to using, but it's something that I'd like you to kind of like try out, especially if you're doing anything that regularly occurs, like you're draining values over time, you're increasing values over time. So, summary. Just wanted to show you that you can make a custom, you can make a better version of what Unreal gives you, like the animation actor. You can go in there using the construction script, enhance what Unreal already gives you. You can make these segmented, free-form, just event graphs that can be added to virtually anything in the entire world, to any other blueprint, called actor components. And you have timer by events, the new, the improved event tick for doing anything that's regular.